Welcome to my channel. Welcome to my second video. While I was getting the editing software so that I could have more interesting videos, I had an idea for a video that I thought would be good as a second video because it's a subject that I don't really care too much about. As I had said before, I had planned on covering primarily authors with this channel. However, I will cover other subjects if they come across my timeline and they might intrigue me. So, one that I thought was intriguing for the past couple weeks has been the case of Oscar Hill IV, and I cannot get away from this man on my timeline. So, the premise is this: he came onto the social media streets requesting a surrogate in order to have a son, and he specifically wanted a woman of color, and he also wanted that woman to have a low body count in order to carry on his namesake and his child. I immediately thought that this was very sketchy because this man is 52 years old. Now, most men in our generation who are 52 years old usually have had at least one child. But let's say if he had no children, as he was alleging initially in the video, why does it matter then what the body count is of the woman who is going to be your surrogate? If a woman is a surrogate, then that means she most likely has had literal bodies inside of her because she is using her body to house humans. Now, unfortunately, there were some women who claimed to be interested in this post, and I wish that they weren't. However, there has been more digging and more back and forth around this guy and what it is that he is claiming. There have been a lot of legal allegations and women who have come out and said that he has actually had children with them, but he does not take care of these children. So, he was nice enough to give us his birth date so that we could look more deeply into him. And there have been a lot of women who have looked into his legal cases and they are extended. What I would like to do is to complement that and to read his natal chart because this isn't really a man that I care about. It's very low stakes for me. But this, however, will give me an opportunity to practice so that we can figure out what on earth is going on with this man and why it is that he is so stuck on selling us a delusion that obviously is not working. So let's start out with his birthday. Oscar Hills IV was born on November 29th, 1971 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Now, I'm guessing that it's Baton Rouge based on some of the comments that I've seen that have said that he grew up in Baton Rouge. So we'll just say Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Now, on the screen, I do have a picture of his chart. Now, because we don't have the birth time, we cannot include the moon or the house placements. I just used a placeholder in order to have something on the screen while I was talking. Now, the first thing I noticed is that he has a Sagittarius stellium. Oh, his sun, Mercury, Jupiter, Neptune, and midheaven are all in Sagittarius. Now, Sagittarius is the ninth sign of the zodiac, and they are represented by the centaur. They represent the combination in between the head and the heart. Sorry, they don't. They represent the combination in between the heart and the rest of the body. Ruled by Jupiter, this is a sign that is known for its faith, for its freedom, for its socialization, as well as for its optimism. Based on some of the surveys I have seen, Sagittarians tend to be the most favored of the zodiac signs because they are so positive. However, if you have a Sagittarius that might be operating on the darker side, this is going to be someone who is going to be very reckless into people's lives. And that is what I think is evidenced when we see the back and forth that Oscar Hill is having with all of these people online, about his request to find a surrogate. In fact, if you're looking for a surrogate, why not just go to a bank? Why not just or a surrogate bank, or I think that they're called something else, but there are services to find a surrogate. If you have to go online in order to find a surrogate, that's just suspect and that's bootleg already. Now his Sun and his Mercury are conjunct. They're under the same sign in Sagittarius. Now, him being a Sagittarius Sun, I think, has a lot to do with the way that he's operating, because he's operating as though he is just supposed to have whatever he wants, and he gets to be preachy and judgmental about this. And that goes into his Mercury being at the 27th degree of Sagittarius. Mercury is in Mercury is in its detriment when it's in Sagittarius, because it lends itself to lying, being very high minded in terms of what they claim. Now, in addition to that, his Jupiter is also conjunct in Sagittarius, and Jupiter is actually dignified when it's in Sagittarius. So I'm fairly certain that when he was younger, he most likely had a lot of options in terms of people that he could talk to, people that he could hang out with. He was probably very charismatic at parties. And I think that this was really helpful, especially because his Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, and Neptune and midheaven, those are all sextiling his Pluto, which is in Libra. So he most likely had a lot of different relationships and relationship options. Now, was he any good at that? Let's talk about that. So his Venus is at the 0 degree of Capricorn. 0 degrees, they can either go really well or really not. I'm going to say, based on what we've seen on the internet, these absolutely have not gone well at all. And in addition to that, you have his Venus and his Pluto and his Chiron, which are in Aries, all squaring each other. That to me points to domestic abuse. And I would say he could have experienced this early on in his life, but I think that as we go on, he's most likely the one who's administering this violence, especially amongst the women that he's been with in his life, because his Chiron, in fact, trines with his sun sign. And it would be really natural for him to just throw an object or to hit a woman in the face. I don't really see this man as being a very nice guy. And in addition to that, he's going to go through multiple people, especially because his Venus squares his Uranus, which is in Libra. Now, because his Uranus and his Pluto are conjoined in the same sign as Libra, they actually point to someone who's going to be very controlling in terms of the way that he conducts himself within his relationships. And also because we have that Uranus in opposition to Chiron and Aries, that could also just point to sudden bursts of domestic violence that his partners may have unfortunately experienced. His Mars is at the 13th degree of Pisces, and his Mars squares his sun sign. So I would take this to mean that there could be sudden bursts of violence, and then maybe he turns around and he plays the victim with his partners. And I'd also say, because his Mars is in Pisces, he may also be someone who might perhaps have a little bit of a drinking problem, because Pisces deals with alcohol. Now, what else have I talked about? All right, so Saturn. Now here's where we get something that's kind of interesting. His Saturn is at the 2nd degree of Gemini. Saturn refers to areas in which we're going to experience some sort of restriction in terms of our life. And because it's in Gemini, I would assume that this means that he's going to always have issues in terms of the communities that he settles in, most likely because of his behavior, because it's opposing it in that sun sign, as well as that Sagittarius stellium, which is in Jupiter, Neptune, and Mercury and his sun. Geez, I need to get better at this. So we've already discussed a little bit about his Uranus, and I forgot to talk about the other aspect, which is the sign Lilith. So his Lilith, and Lilith refers to issues that we may have had repressed in childhood that come out in other ways. His Lilith opposes his Aries Chiron because his Lilith is in Libra, and that is joined in with his Uranus and his Pluto. So this is somebody who has created a lot of open enemies based on what he's done, as well as various lawsuits. This also could refer to a lot of debt that he might have, specifically when it comes to his partnerships and when he splits up. I just see him as being the type of guy who's like, if I can't get my way, I'm gonna beat your face like Chris Brown, and then I'm gonna turn around and walk away and abandon you. Especially with that Saturn in Gemini. Now, as far as do I think that he believes that he's doing anything wrong? No, I don't. And I say that because his Saturn is in opposition to his Neptune, which is in Sagittarius. So when Saturn and Neptune are opposing each other, this is going to be somebody who believes the lies that he is telling other people. And because he also has that Jupiter conjunct Neptune, which is also in Sagittarius. So he believes that he is, one, charismatic enough to get away with what he's doing, and second of all, he believes what it is that he's telling people. And in terms of, do I think that he cares when he abandons his children? Because I also want to say, since he has Mercury in Sagittarius in opposition to that Saturn, that could represent having a shutdown communication, either with siblings, with families, or in this case, this could be children, because the Sun also deals with children in our lives. And since he is a Sagittarius Sun opposing his Saturn, this could also point to why he may not be in communication with his children right now. Now, his North Node sextiles his Chiron in Aries. His North Node is Aquarius. So then that also means that his South Node is Leo. Leo rules the fifth house in terms of astrology. So this refers to gambling, investments, children, romantic love. This is somebody who has a lot of karmic debt when it comes to his marriages, when it comes to his children, as well as when it comes to romantic love. So he's repeating a lot of those similar patterns that he most likely has had somewhere in a past life, to where he was supposed to stay connected to these people and perhaps he didn't. And now in this lifetime, he's just moving through as though he's just diabolical. The last aspect that I wanted to talk about was the conjunction in between his sun sign as well as his Neptune. And I think I'll also talk more about the Venus and Neptune square as well. But I do want to discuss the importance of Neptune in terms of what it can represent in a chart. So Neptune refers to all things that are a form of escape. It can represent nightclubs, bars, fashion, models, icons, because all of those deal with Neptune. At the same time, Neptune can deal with prisons. It deals with things that can imprison us that we might be very hard to break free from. And it's also a sign that can be very tragic, because usually when the veil is lifted and we are disillusioned, it's when we are too late. Now, because his sun is conjoined to Neptune in Sagittarius, that means that he has a really bad hero complex in terms of the way that he sees himself. So he most likely sees himself as this hero, and also as somebody who was most likely victimized. So victimized by his former partners, victimized by former communities because it's in opposition to Saturn in that Gemini, as well as being a victim to even his children, because how could they come along and mess it up for him? So in his mind, when something isn't working out, he just abandons it, because Neptune is also the spirit of abandonment. When it comes to having Sun conjoint Neptune, This could be a person who could be very focused on the image that they're trying to project. And then when something comes along and breaks that image, then they're going to immediately reject it, abandon it, get defensive around it. And we've seen the exact same thing that he has done in terms of these comments sections. I'm only reporting on this one this time because it was just a very quick chart to do an analysis on. I hope that you have enjoyed this chart reading of Oscar Hill. I think I'm going to tag a few people who might be interested in it, but I wanted to know, what do you think about a man that has this type of chart? Is this a man that you would want to have as being your next baby daddy? All the legal troubles, the children that he's abandoned, the fact that he cannot be within community with people, and also on top of that, the fact that he has a lot of anger issues. Essentially, this is somebody that we're talking about where he's just going to be flat out delusional, most likely speaking, for the rest of his life, and he's going to spend a lot of time trying to convince other people that he is the way that he sees himself. Leave a comment below.